First, though, we're talking about long COVID and the debilitating symptoms that can go with that. Have you suffered from it? Is someone in your life got it? Patients in Sussex who are suffering from the condition are among the first in the world taking part in a pioneering study which looks into the long-term cognitive effects of the illness and how to treat it. Well, I've been speaking to Dr. Dennis Chan, who's a consultant neurologist at University Hospital Sussex NHS Foundation Trust, who's leading the study.
We've found, first of all, that it's very persistent, and we're still seeing people that began to be infected back in early 2020 before the pandemic started, and they're still turning up as new patients in my clinic now, 2 years down the line. So it's extremely prolonged. We're finding that the main symptoms by quite a long way for our patients is they are fatigue, brain fog, or also known as cognitive impairment, and then to a lesser extent there's disturbance of sleep with insomnia, anxiety, depression, headache. Those are the main ones. There's also beyond that a plethora of other less frequently observed symptoms, but those are the main ones. The symptoms are not only debilitating, but they're very disruptive. The vast majority of people are coming up to clinic and they're not able to return to work. That's the severity of their problems, and we're talking about all sorts of professions, and so the impact on individuals and their families is profound.
I'd imagine as well, given these symptoms, that a lot of people have had them for a while and not associated them with COVID, so you must be getting new patients all the time.
We are. I think they are beginning to. I think knowledge about long COVID became quite widespread towards the end of 21 and certainly through 22. So I think there is a lot of increasing awareness out there, and a lot of information is shared via social media platforms as well. So I do think that while it may not have been so apparent at the outset, I think there is more awareness now among the population.
Is there any sort of hope in sight for relieving these symptoms, or people getting back to exactly the way they were before?
I would like to say that we have an end date. I can't say that. I can say that people that we saw earlier in clinic in late 2020, early 21, when we see them a follow-up, they are beginning to turn the corner. Now, at the moment, obviously I'm not in a situation to say that's going to be the outcome for everybody, but it's certainly promising that people are spontaneously improving. Beyond that, there's a lot of work, as people know, in trying to find drug treatments or specific therapies for long COVID, and that's trickier. We can treat the insomnia, anxiety, depression, headaches, and by doing that, we can relieve symptoms to some extent of fatigue and brain fog, but there are at present no specific treatments for fatigue and brain fog above and beyond supportive management, such as pacing, changing work practices, taking time off, learning how not to overexert because that aggravates fatigue, those sort of practices. We're looking at cognitive rehabilitation, trying to, not quite brain training, but a sort of more structured, formal version of that. We're about to start a trial to see if that helps people with brain fog in long COVID, but we don't know the results of that yet, and the trial has barely started.
Is this likely to affect any one group more than others, or is it something that has affected across the spectrum of patients?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I think it seems to be across the spectrum, young and old. There does seem to be a bit of a gender difference. So, and this is in line with other studies around the world, and the reasons why are at this moment unclear in terms of biological reasons, but women seem to be affected more than men, and that's about a 2/3, 1/3 split, so it's quite significant. And why that is, we don't know. And certainly that's reflected in my clinic and my practice.
Whenever we talk about this, a lot of people get in touch who have been affected by ME, and they say actually this sounds very similar. Is there any crossover? Is this a similar condition?
I think it's similar in the sense that there is chronic fatigue. So certainly this rather ill-defined entity of chronic fatigue syndrome, for which we have limited medical understanding, there certainly people with long COVID have long-standing fatigue. So I think on that basis, yes, there are similarities. I think one would have to be a little bit careful in drawing too many parallels. We simply don't know enough. It may well be, as science unfolds, that we do find more in link. But I think at this stage, we don't yet know. Having said that, there is no doubt that fatigue is an absolutely dominant feature in long COVID, and that might in turn give us a greater understanding of what may be happening in ME and other chronic fatigue syndromes.
And this goes beyond, isn't it? Because we all feel a bit tired at times, and this goes way beyond this. I would imagine that you see people whose lives are just changed beyond belief because of this.
Yeah, this is not a stand of fatigue. We're talking about people who say they can barely read the newspaper because after the first page, they have to stop and take half an hour out to go back. I mean, we're talking minimal physical or mental exertion will bring on profound fatigue. So yes, it is a totally different situation to the everyday fatigue that you describe.
Let's hear firsthand how it really impacts on people's lives. So my next guest, Catherine Francis, worked as cabin crew, loved seeing the world, meeting new people, exciting destinations. And then she gets COVID in October 2020. So life for her now is very different to what she was expecting it to be. She was thinking that maybe she'd be thinking, settle down, have children, start to enjoy that stage of her life. But instead, she's been affected by long COVID. And Catherine joins me on the line now. Catherine, thank you so much for joining us. I think it's really hard when you've got these symptoms like fatigue or, and everyone can go, oh, yes, I understand. I get tired as well, when actually what you're experiencing sounds hideous.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that the word fatigue really does it justice, if I'm honest. I mean, it's very, very debilitating. And it's, you feel it down to your bones. It's a case of one day, you can move around the house a little bit easier, but then the next day you struggle to go from your bedroom to the bathroom because you feel so exhausted. It's like certainly something I've never experienced before in my life. And as you said, I mean, I was cabin crew. I used to be tired quite a lot of the time. So it's definitely a change of pace for me. I think what's so important about long COVID is that, it's just so cruel in so many different ways, and you have to be so resilient to get up and try again each day and never really knowing what you're going to encounter.
I think a lot of us are able to cope when we're not well because you know where it's going to go. You know it's going to come to an end. You normally know how these things play out. But there's so much uncertainty surrounding this with what's going to happen next.
Yeah, absolutely. And, my story isn't unique. There's well over 2 million people in the UK who are impacted by this. And, there's just not a prognosis for us at the moment. I think that's what's so difficult, and having to raise awareness and trying to get the word out that actually living with COVID, which is the general messaging that we've all been hearing since the pandemic is effectively over, supposedly, is that this is living with COVID. This is the impact of, getting this virus badly and not recovering from it and not knowing why.
What are you able to do then? Are you working at all? Are you able to socialise with friends? How great an impact is this having?
So, like you said, I was cabin crew until August 2020, and then I went effectively to start a new career. I got a job, PR agency up in London, and then I literally caught COVID in October 2020, and I was really ill at the time. It was worse than what was kind of being spoken about at the time, but I recovered. But then it was basically every month or so, I would just start to get very, very sick. Lots of different symptoms. It started with chronic cough, breathlessness, headaches, heart arrhythmia, the fatigue, the muscle aches, the weakness, everything kind of started, and I wasn't really sure what was going on. So I ended up going off sick in June 2021, and I tried for months to sort of do reduced hours, trying to go back to work, and I just wasn't getting better. I was getting worse. So it was in March this year that I had to make the very difficult decision to basically focus on recovery, and whatever that would possibly look like. So I've given up work since March this year. I can't do much. I am pretty much housebound. I have a couple of good days every now and again. When I say a good day, I mean I'm only mildly in pain. I'm only mildly fatigued. But on those days, I try and get out of the house, whether it's for an hour or so. But, recent weeks, it's been very hard.
How easy? I mean, it must be really hard to keep your spirits up when life changes so dramatically and you see other people that have had COVID and then recovered and get on with life, and that's not been the situation for you.
Definitely. It's it just kind of feels a bit like long COVID roulette, really. There's no rhyme or reason as to why I would get long COVID. I was fit, healthy beforehand. I've never had any issues with anything like this before. So, for it to impact my life so wildly is, pretty hard.
So sorry to hear what you've been through, and I do hope that the recovery is on its way. And thank you very much for joining us on the programme today.